All right, folks, welcome back in. We have the grumpy fellas here with us, and we are talking about, well, it's really a fun topic. I know that these two guys are passionate about it, even though you may not have known that. And this is something that you know that I'm passionate about it if you've seen my channel at all. And it's something that is just so prevalent in our society. And there's a lot of historical preferences. It can make you feel every kind of emotion out there. It's at every wedding. It's at every funeral. And today we're going to talk about music. So welcome on in. Joe, Andy, how you guys doing?
Good.
I'm doing great, man. Doing great.
Excited to talk about this topic. We've hemmed and hawed and hinted at it for many a moon, and now we're going to dig in.
Yeah, let's do it. So where do you want to start with it, Joe?
Wow. I think I'll start with one of the ideas I threw into the chat, and that is the idea of purchasing music compared to when we were all teenagers or in our 20s. How that whole thing, which used to be such a big deal in California, I don't know about North Carolina or Georgia, but in California, we had this major record store called Tower Records, and they were huge. They were warehouses, right? And the ones up in LA, the bands would actually show up there when they did a release and do a signing and all that jazz. So it was a big deal. And you'd go into the Tower when you knew you had something you wanted to buy, but the thing was so huge you would spend an hour or two just browsing vinyl and old 45s and now it's just click got the song.
Yeah, that's definitely, things have changed as far as that went. And for me, it was like, how do you hear your favorite song? You either go buy it or you just sit around and listen for the radio, and then you try to catch it, and then you make your mixtape if you can catch it when it comes on. That's why you would call into the radio station to request your song so you could actually try to record it on your tape player. Andy?
Well, even more so than the actual buying of it. If you go back and look at and listen to the stories of, say, how the Rolling Stones got together, or all these other seminal bands, a lot of times they kind of identified each other because one of them would be walking around with some records. So it's like they were walking around with Howling Wolf records, which, granted, most of the people that are going to watch this have no idea who Howling Wolf is. And to be honest with you, you're not missing a whole lot if you've made it this far in life without knowing who he is. But just the fact that that was something that you could identify. Hey, that's somebody, that's one of my people there. And we've gone from, like Joe was saying, it being an event to go purchase music to something that you do entirely online. It's usually consumed through earbuds, so you're not sharing it with other people. When I was in high school, it was a big thing for us to go hang out at somebody's house and listen to music. If somebody got a new record or a cassette tape or a CD or whatever. And we just hang out and go through the records, and sometimes we bring over new music, and we swap tapes out in the hallway of the school. It's like, hey, this that's actually how I discovered the Ramones, is somebody had a song of theirs, and I'm like, who is this? And of course, in those days, if you found a new band, unless you were friends with the person that worked at the music store, or you just had a good network of people, it was hard to get a hold of music sometimes, unless it was top 40 stuff. So now that seems to have, those walls seem to have broken down a lot. And so for me, it's much more interesting how music is consumed and how that social aspect of music has changed. We went from listening together to, you get 10 kids together, most of them got the earbuds in, they could be listening to something completely different. They're not really sharing anything. Hey, this is a cool song or whatever. It's, I'm in my own little world.
So let's talk about some of the different musical movements throughout the years. I don't know how far you want to go back, but a lot of times what you'll see is historically there'll be something that'll pop up that'll be kind of like rebellion music, and then it'll turn popular, and then sometimes people get accused of being sellouts because of that as you go through time. I don't know how far you want to take it back, because, I mean, you got all the way back to doing the Charleston, which was risque back in the 20s with the speakeasies and all that stuff. And then kind of the big movements were, big band music, and then the main one that you remember is it was rock and roll there in 1956, which kind of became a big deal. But I don't know where you guys want to go with that particular topic and what genres of music you want to discuss. Joe, where do you want to start with that?
Because I don't know. It's to me, it's weird because technology played a much greater role in those days, because if you're living in New York, I don't know that you're getting any of the Southern music, which we would later call, country and Western, because it was all like on local radio shows or local studios that would broadcast to fairly local areas. So I don't know how savvy people in the Northeast or the Northwest were to stuff coming out of Louisiana or Tennessee or things of that nature. But I know that I watched even though I'm not a huge country fan, I watched Ken Burns' documentary series on country music, and it was really fascinating historically where it fits in with everything else. But yeah, I mean, I don't know much about the big band era. I think my real tap into knowing historical and cultural relevance comes with rock and roll, maybe a little bit of blues.
Yeah, the thing with the big bands, right, is that's how you got your sound, is you had to have a lot of people in the band. Right. And then when the technology, as you mentioned, the electrified music, the amplified guitar, cut that out. And you only had to have 4 people in a band instead of having to have 25 people in the band. So that's
makes sense.
I always thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Well, another interesting thing about big band music is the singer in big band ensembles were never the star. You go back and look, it's always either the saxophone player or the trumpet player or whoever the band leader was.
The band leader,
the singer was always they were just another part of the band, and that shifted dramatically to the point, and it probably began before rock and roll, because you had your Bing Crosbys and you had your Cole Porters and those guys that came along, and obviously we're omitting thousands of other artists, but the singer did become the front man or the front person, as the case may be, and that was kind of an interesting change.
Yeah, well, you didn't have 20. You didn't have 20 people to fight over, so you could really do some vocal. Put some character and feelings in your vocals. I think Bing Crosby was the first one to do that, but that I can remember.
Well, and now it's come full circle. Now we have a lot of singers who can't write songs, can't read music, can't play any instruments, but they can dance really good. They can dance. And so, yeah, there you go.
Now, is that Grump or your age that's showing there, Andy? I'm not quite sure on that one. I was going to say, but during the big band era, that's very white music, commercial music for its time. Because then you've got down in the South, on the Chitlin circuit, you have black bands that are 3, 4, 5 strong, a lot of female singers, but whether you called it blues or I don't know what the genre was, but you had all of that going on down in the South. You had Cajun acts, you had Zydeco acts coming out of Louisiana. If anyone out there listens to this and they really like the history of music, one of the things I think you need to look for is pick up the CDs by Alan Lomax. And then his son, I think his name was Peter, he was an ethnographer. And when Roosevelt put in all his, government, the WPA projects and stuff like that, Lomax would travel the country with a microphone and whatever was his recording gear. And he would go into the Appalachians, and he would go down and hear prison chants. And he would go into the Southwest and hear a variety of Hispanic musics. And the musical, when it comes to like folk music, the musical origins and all the different ethnicities that we had in our country in the 20s and 30s are so much richer than I had thought before I listened to the Lomax tapes. It's really fascinating. And it's old and it's crackly and it's, not pristine digital quality, but it's a wonderful touchstone to listen to the musical roots in this nation in the 20th century.
Well, and it probably came down a lot to how, again, back to what we were talking about before, how you consume music. So if you were in the 1920s, if you lived in a rural area or you were going to a jug house or a drink house, speakeasy, and they didn't have room for 30 people. So if you just had a guy that was sitting in a corner playing guitar singing, that was how you connected with it. But then if you went to church on Sunday, they would have a full choir. So it would really kind of depend on how you interfaced as far as what kind of music you were drawn to. And just like anything else, your taste is informed by what you grew up with. So if you grew up listening to big band music, then country western music or hillbilly music or Appalachian music or whatever, or the Southwestern Mexican, Spanish influenced music would seem very foreign to you. So I would think it would really depend on how what your environment was.
Yeah, that's really true.
You were a lot more limited.
Go ahead.
And you were a lot more limited, especially pre-radio.
Well, that's what I was getting to. You get to the 1950s, and up until that point, I think you're exactly right, that a young person didn't have any choice but just to, what you hear that your family's exposed you to, whether it's, church or they all gathered around the radio at that point. Right. And then in the 50s, you started having, all right, you get your own car and your car has a different radio in it, or you get your own record player in your room and you can start listening to your own music. And you can start to, have, find your own styles or things that you enjoyed. And I think that part of that's where, rock and roll music came from. It's a way that young people could express themselves or they could relate to it better. And then you had, the big, huge stars like Elvis and some of that stuff in the 50s and early 60s when the Beatles came along. Because that very much became a young person. That's who they were catering to at that point. But before that, you were catering to the parents because those are the only ones that could afford to buy anything, as far as the radios and the record players and some of that stuff.
Yeah. And I think to me, it's kind of fascinating, being an English teacher, I always talk about how any art, not just books, are reflections of life. And all the 1950s rock and roll music just kind of seems so wholesome and entertaining, right? And then as you start going through periods of social upheaval, like when we get into the 60s, right? Then you start getting guys like Dylan or Joan Baez or these more rebellious voices or voices that are pointing fingers in their lyrics. I mean, and then the Beatles listen and smoke pot with Dylan or whatever it is, and then we see them kind of shift a little bit. But they're the poppiest of the pop bands, and it's scary to me to think that they only lasted 5 or 6 years. To have the influence that they have had through the last 50, 60 years on music. But then that's when you start, and of course you had it before. You had guys like Pete Seeger writing their songs and everything. But again, it seemed to be much more regional or the audience was much smaller. But again, with the advent of technology, with bigger wattage radio stations and things like that, then you start getting social commentary in music. Then the black voice starts getting in there in the 60s, at least to being more heard. And then so I think the 60s is really kind of cool because it marks, what are these social movements, which was like punk in the 70s, rap in the late 80s and early 90s, where you have this, you talk about rebellion, Brian, where you have these voices of rebellion. These are these kind of pockets, whatever you want to call alternative or grunge in the late 80s and early 90s, mid 90s as well. It seems to be the most commonly accessible form of entertainment for that voice. You're not going to get millions of people going into art museums to interpret a piece of art that's rebellious. You might get a book or two that a lot of people, if they're in school, but music is definitely that avenue for the most different voices, be they entertaining or be they having political commentary.
One thing I think that's interesting about this conversation is without doing the stereotypical old man thing of, oh, music isn't what it used to be, which I'm kind of proud of. And again, I think between the three of us, and we've talked about this privately, between the three of us, we do kind of cover a pretty wide range of different music styles. I'm pretty sure that of the three of us, Brian is probably the one that's most likely to like jazz. I will go ahead and go on record and say that I cannot stand jazz. No, don't like it. Don't tell me how awesome this artist is. It's a mess.
Yeah, it's a mess for me. I don't like it either. I like somebody just a little bit more on beat that's not just so open to interpretation. It's a little too out there for me.
That being said, though, there are quite a few songs from the big band era. Obviously, a lot of stuff from the early Robert Johnson era of blues that I enjoy. Try to get along with country western, but outside of Johnny Cash and a few of the more rebellious sorts, really have a hard time getting into that too much. Especially whenever we're getting into the Nashville machine from the 1960s on, when they were all wearing nudie suits and it was just pretty much a factory. That's some of the worst stuff to try to listen to that I've ever actually attempted to try to enjoy.
But what happened after that was then you had the Willie Nelson and the outlaw movement came and, got a really following. And then it got so big that, okay, now it's mainstream and it became popular too. And they were able to coexist for a long, long time. And it's kind of interesting. That was something that you see in all types of music, right? With ska music, you got Gwen Stefani's, no doubt. They were like really underground for a long time, and then all of a sudden they had a hit, and then they become very popular. Or rap, right, Joe? I mean, back in, was it the 80s that the rap started, and then enough people liked it, and it grew fast enough that, okay, now it's mainstream. Now you got hip hop.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, like, I always wonder, like, North Carolina, when I think of music, is such a diverse state because you have, on the western part of the state, you have the mountains. And so that's a completely different sound than the eastern side of the state, particularly bleeding down into South Carolina, where you have the Gullah movement and you have these African-American chanting singers, and you have this stuff that's particular to kind of black culture. And true, that's more South Carolina than North Carolina. But I think banjo picking and jug blowing and that kind of thing that we might associate with like Appalachians and bluegrass kind of music is far different than what you would hear on the other side of the state, which might have a more country western-esque kind of stamp about it. I'm not sure because, like Andy, I'm not huge with the genre. I like a lot of the folk variants of what we might call country, like the Cajun and the Zydeco and the bluegrass. I like all of those more kind of pocketed regional takes, opposed to the mainstream C and W. Like, and again, like Andy, outside of a few voices like Johnny Cash and Dolly Parton, I think Dolly Parton is one of the best songwriters we have in United States history. Not just country songwriters, but just songwriters. You know, so. But I can't listen to country and western. And I know even amongst country fans, I hear like there's this schism between what has been on the radio for a certain amount of time in a modern sense versus what was big maybe in the 70s or 80s. I don't know where those lines are drawn. I know a lot of the artists you sing, Brian, when you do your karaoke are artists I remember from days gone by. Not way back, but from when I was much younger. You don't drop an artist and I'm like, who the heck is that? You know, you're with the Alan Jackson or the George. These are names I remember in the 80s and so on.
Yeah, that was 80s and 90s. You know, country was really big then when Garth Brooks came along, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And now we've got what's called the bro country and on the radio. Nobody likes the bro country.
I'm kind of with you. I do like when there is somewhat of a blending, when someone's trying something new, such as cowpunk, which is a combination of country music and punk rock. All three of us probably, Brian being the possibility of possible exclusion. I remember when the Beastie Boys came out, and this was like, oh, this is something different. That's always been the thing for me. Somebody that's trying to do something different. It's original, and sometimes it gets popular. Sometimes that becomes the next wave, but then a lot of times it doesn't. And so you have this little subgenre that kind of forms off to the side. And but there's always gems in those little pockets that form off to the side that don't necessarily become top 40 stuff.
And with the internet these days, you can find any subgenre you want, right? So and that's huge because I now think that the influence that mainstream radio used to have. They used to control, the DJ used to control everything that you hear. The DJ had to approve it, right? Or the radio station had to approve it. Well, now you can find whatever you want. So I do think that mainstream has become less and less important. Obviously, buying records is not a thing anymore. You just stream it on YouTube or Spotify or something like that. So I do question where this is going, right? You know, unless you're a really, really big name, how do you make money? I mean, especially right now because you can't even tour like you really want to. So live music has changed on how we go to concerts or not. So it's kind of interesting on where we're at, what's become important, what's become less important, and where it goes from here. If you guys want to jump in on that.
Well, and it's become, what's interesting is the record companies used to be where all the money was. So you had to get signed. And that is
get a record deal.
The other way around now. There's a blues artist named Samantha Fish that this past maybe 6 months or so, she released a new album, and she started to make a lot of movement in the blues charts. She actually played in my town in the last couple of years. It was a small little, not even the biggest place in town. It was just almost a dive bar. And so she released an album, and she's had some success. And so I do think it's become decentralized as far as the record companies, the producers holding all the power. And now it's more in the artist hands. But the flip side of that is you're not getting the big stadium tours anymore so much. You're getting artists that pretty much have to live on tour all the time. So, it's going to be interesting to see how that democracy works out for artists.
Yeah, I think of, and I'm going to kind of overlap a little bit with Andy here, but I think of two guys from Pittsburgh, Mac Miller and Wiz Khalifa, whose careers, both rap guys, one unfortunately has passed away, whose careers started all through social media. These are guys around in the early mid 2000s, and I like that. I never liked the the amount of money the record companies made off the back of the artists. That always bothered me, and just the power of that contract. So I kind of like the evening of the playing field a little bit more. And if you can get famous and find a distributor for an album, and you get to keep maybe more of the lion's share of the profit, I like that way that music has gone. And I also I see this through my own kids, and I see this through my students. They don't seem to be as close-minded to music as we might have been growing up. They're more open to listen to polygenre. I remember in high school, the two big musics in the early 80s when I was in high school was punk new wave and metal or rock and roll, right? And you had the metal kids and you had the punk new wave kids, and they all dressed, appropriately, but it actually created schism. Like, I will not listen to Led Zeppelin because that's metal. And yet the stoners listen to Zeppelin, right? When you're 16, I'm going to listen to my stuff. And you had in San Diego, you had the new wave station, and you had a couple rock and roll stations, and it was just a dividing line than anything else. And it kept me away from really good music till I matured enough to say, well, Zeppelin actually has some pretty good songs. Let me listen to some of these other artists I tuned out to because they were the bad guys, so to speak. So I like that because my kids will listen to all sorts of stuff. Like Bella loves, he's a contemporary guy. I can't think of his name. This country guy. She also absolutely adores Post Malone and some other people that just would not go together 40 years ago when we were in high school. And I kind of like that too. I kind of like music being a playground of all genres and styles and everyone getting a shake at it.
Yeah, you see kids' playlist, and they've got all kind of stuff on it. There's stuff that you didn't think they would ever know, like stuff from the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s. Like, how do you even know this song? But they'll know it. And sometimes it's because it's become a meme or something like that. The Rick Astley song, "Never Gonna Give You," that song. So it's kind of interesting on how, as you said, they are really eclectic, but also just have a wide variety of music. Some of that I think is social media, and I have the XM satellite radio, and they've created now you can listen to TikTok radio, so you can hear all the songs that you can do TikToks to.
No kidding.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm totally dialed out of that stuff.
Yeah, me too. TikTok's not my world, that's for sure.
So with TikTok radio, do you get a whole song, or is it just like 30 seconds of it or whatever?
I haven't turned it on the channel yet, but next time I hear about it, I will try it out.
But here's what it does, Andy, to me, I think. Like the guy who did the TikTok with the skateboard with Fleetwood Mac drinking the cranberry juice. You remember that TikTok? Yeah. Sales of that song spiked, just that song, because it exposed all these kids to Fleetwood Mac, to that one song. And then maybe they deep dive and go, okay, what else does this group have? So you get that weird kind of effect where, like Brian said, how in the hell do you know the Doors? Your parents were barely alive when the Doors were making music. How do you have two or three of their, it's just this meme effect. And also games like Rock Band, which I absolutely love because I have all these songs from various genres, including country, that I will play to, reach achievements or whatever during the game. And then after you play them a few times and get a few listens, and you're like, that's a damn good song. And you never would have probably been exposed to it. And so that's another interesting little way that younger people might get to hear songs that you would think they had no idea where they came from, why you listening to them.
Well, hopefully, as a result of some of these little movements, we will get back to more organic music that people are actually creating, as opposed to something being made on a computer. Or not that I'm against technology, but I'd like to see music be enhanced with technology, not be created through technology.
I think you're going to see both, because you have like one-man studios, and they don't even, they've got to record the studio stuff, and I've seen them do it. There's virtual instruments. So they create the beats themselves and turn it into whatever instrument they want using a keyboard. And you don't have to go out and get a fiddle player, or you don't have to go out and get an electric guitar player, or this or that and the other. So I do think you're going to continue to see that, just because popular artists do it too, right? The ones that are really, really talented. What's the redheaded guy that plays all the loops of music back and forth to create a song on stage? Who?
Ed Sheeran?
Yeah, Ed Sheeran. right? I mean, he's got a band and all that kind of stuff, but he can he can create a song basically using just himself standing there.
Right.
So it's very cool to see, and I think a lot of people would jump on that, but I don't know. Is that going to keep somebody from learning to play the electric guitar and being able to just be a master at an instrument? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know where that goes.
He did and he famously did it live in the Grammys. He had a very big hit, and he is a good musician. He's a singer songwriter. He could have survived in the. But what he had this little foot pad thing that was tech, and he would create all the sounds, but then he would control where they came in. So there was a couple vocals, there was him hitting on his drum like a percussion, or on his guitar like a percussion, and then there was one guitar note that he wanted playing while he was playing another guitar note. So it's still all created by him, but he kind of mixed it right there so he could be a one-man band for this performance of his famous song. And it was really, really cool. Mm-hmm. So all created music, but the technology really added to the effect of him being able to play on his own.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool to see.
Yeah. You can look it up, Andy, on YouTube, Ed Sheeran Grammy performance, to get an idea. The name of the song is Shape of You. It's worth a watch just to see what he's doing. I wanted to say one other thing that, since we're talking about this, and this might just, let's get grumpy. All right. It's the name of the damn place, right?
Watch out now.
All right. So this might just be a Joe thing, but maybe it's an Andy and Brian thing too. Meatloaf. Okay. Never been a huge Meatloaf fan, but the songs of his I really, really like. But I always thought he was a singer-songwriter. I didn't realize he had a lyricist or a guy he collaborated with to do the lyrics while he sang. And of course, Elton John famously had Bernie Taupin, and I guess I am just a purist. I want a guy who can play that guitar or drum or bass or whatever, sing, and write the damn words. Do you think an artist's status drops a little bit? And I don't like using the word just to minimize it, but if they're just a singer, now in John's case, obviously he's a pianist as well, and I think so is Meatloaf. If he's just a singer, maybe plays an instrument or three, but doesn't write the lyrics, or is it okay? That's just the way music works sometimes.
For me, that's just the way music works. But yeah, I consider myself, not a full-fledged artist, but I do a lot of music. I play a lot of different instruments, but I do not have the talent to write. Never really tried to hone that very much. I messed around once or twice with it, but it's just, to me, it's two totally separate talents for me. There's some really famous artists that just sing songs and have had long careers, just finding the right songs. And I think they find people that they work with, the songwriter that does songs that kind of suit what they're going for. But for me, I don't hold that against them. Good music's good music. I don't care who wrote it. Okay. I will give if they can do both, I feel it is a different vibe. I feel like if it's somebody who writes their own stuff, like Chris Stapleton, just getting out there and singing a song that he wrote and real stripped down version of it. But I think a lot of it too is how it's produced. You can just tell if it's a singer-songwriter kind of song. A lot of times it's different than, a big production.
Okay. Andy?
For me, the people that are just the singers, it seems like they don't really, they may have long careers, but they don't really create those songs that stick with you forever. So they're continuing to make money and, having these long careers and probably make a whole lot more money than any of us would ever be able to imagine. But if you think about the stuff that you listened to 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, chances are pretty good the stuff you're still listening to, even if it's an occasional thing, was something that somebody in the band wrote. They all, got together, and it was like you guys are talking about, the singer-songwriter sort of situation. It was actually released before I was born, but the album Tapestry, pretty much every song on that album has been redone by somebody at some point. And it's one of the greatest And during the 70s, it was definitely heralded as a great album. But now, very few people have heard of it, which is kind of a shame.
Who's the artist, Andy?
It was, I want to say Carole King, but it wasn't Carole King. It was, oh God.
Right. That sounds.
The album was Tapestry. It had Joni Mitchell's covered a lot of stuff off of it.
But she's a heavyweight songwriter too. I mean, she's written. I mean, she has written some. She is just a premier songwriter in history, I think.
Yeah,
and I'm ashamed of myself for not being able to remember the artist. So, on the odd chance, on the microscopic chance that the artist actually sees this video, I do apologize for not remembering your name. And for all of the boomers out there, forgive me for not remembering the name of the artist. Just having a brain fart.
Yeah, wait, that's the old man in us. So over the past couple years, probably 2 or 3 years since I've gotten Sirius XM radio, and they've got, particular channels, 80s channels, 90s channels, this and that and the other, hair band from the, 80s and 90s. I go back and listen to some of that stuff. Some of it is great, and I remember it being great. Some of it I go back and listen to, is like, I'll see the title pop up and I'll go, oh yeah, I love this song. And that song did not stand the test of time. It is crap now. It's like, how in the world did I ever like that? I don't know if you guys had any experience like that, but I've noticed it a lot over the past 2 or 3 years. When I've really gone back and listened to stuff from my youth, is like, I thought that song was good and it's terrible.
For me, a lot of times, I'll remember the hook.
Yeah.
It's like I forget the rest of the song, but that hook will get stuck in my head.
It's raised down in Africa.
And I'll try to, I'll Google it, look it up by the lyrics, or, and then finally pull the song up on YouTube, and it's like, oh, wow. Yeah, same experience. It's like, man, this song sucks.
Yeah, the verses are terrible. All you remember is that one little line, the electric boogaloo or whatever it was that you really liked.
Joe? Definitely had that experience.
I've had that experience before as well. It's just part of, I guess, who you are when you encounter that song. A Cheap Trick was the first LP I bought, Heaven Tonight. I was a big Cheap Trick fan when I was a kid. And now I listen to their music and I'm like, yeah, it's okay. But I mean, I was head over heels for the guys. That's when I was listening to a smattering of like rock until I encountered new wave and punk, and then I became hardcore that way. So I'll always have my love for Cheap Trick, but it's not like it was when I was 12 or 13.
So how about live music versus recorded music?
I'll tell you this. Sorry, Andy. I'll be real quick. To me, if it's a band like a Depeche Mode or a New Order, if it's a synth, keyboard heavy band, I won't see them live because that is all produced. But you get a good classic 4-piece. There was a band called Oingo Boingo out of California that was in the 80s, and Danny Elfman, its singer-songwriter, its creator, has gone on and won Oscars, right? They had a brass section, a drummer, a bassist, a guitarist. Danny would sometimes get on the rhythm guitar, and he also would play xylophone and weird stuff. Big sound. Saw them live 5 or 6 times. One of the best live bands I'd ever seen because they sounded just like vinyl. So those kinds of musicians. Yes, I love going to REM. I've seen REM live. I've seen The Clash. Clash actually didn't sound as good live as I had hoped. They did not sound as good as I had hoped. But I will stay away from any synth techno kind of thing live because I know it's going to suck in comparison.
Oingo Boingo, just in case somebody is watching this, my favorite song of theirs, it's probably their biggest hit, Dead Man's Party. Love that song. But yeah, and we're kind of running parallel with each other. I really, really enjoy live music, but I'm with you. It's got to be something being created there. If you're just, hitting a bunch of buttons on on some electronic device, it's not going to really. You're going to suffer loss of sound quality, and you're not going to have that. physical experience of the music actually hitting you. Whereas if somebody is playing a guitar or even a woodwind instrument or whatever, there's definitely a different feeling when it's coming from that as opposed to coming out of from even to an extent from coming from amplifiers.
Yeah, I think it all depends on what you want to get out of a concert, right? Are you going to the concert just to party? Are you going to the crowd, the atmosphere, the anticipation, the electricity, that everybody's screaming that you can't get anywhere else unless you're going to a football game or something like that. But the electricity that's around that, I saw Garth Brooks when he was big in the 90s. And that was something that I'll never forget. I never saw anything like that. Just, everything was so loud you could not hear anything. Yet I still loved it. But for me, it's all about the vocals because I like good music and somebody that can sing. So now you can kind of tell. You can go on YouTube and listen to concerts. Are they good live or not? And if they're not good live, I don't really want to go. I also think it's different. It depends on if the instrumentation, right? You go hear a bluegrass band that really knows what they're doing live, and they're all around one microphone, and you're just here they are, 5 guys just playing instruments. It's really amazing to see those fingers flying and the artistry, and they work in one microphone. One person will step up, the next one steps back. So there's all kind of different dynamics you can get. If it's somebody, Chris Stapleton or somebody just doing, blues and a guitar, and they're just kind of riffing off of stuff. Just a lot of different things there that you can get out of a live performance. But then again, you do want it to be true to the way it sounded on when it was recorded. You don't want to be disappointed when you go to a show, that's for sure.
Did you guys see, and it was on, I want to say America's Got Talent several years ago. But one of the contestants actually played a room harp. So it was a series of cables lined up, and the bridge was actually up on stage. But the cables ran the entire length of the auditorium, and I can't remember if he plucked the strings with his hands or if he hit a hammer. But it was really, I can only imagine how awesome that experience was for the actual room to be the sound chamber.
Yeah. His whole thing was making instrumentation out of like the surroundings too. That was his act. I remember that. That was one of the seasons I watched. 2 more things to what you were saying. One's a question, Brian. One is, I'll take a small venue over a stadium any day. One of it's, I don't like crowds, even though you get all that electricity and there is something to that. But I love, there was an old punk band called The Damned, and I got to see one of their later iterations in a bar that was famous in San Diego for holding, being a great small venue for mid-level acts and below. And it was a great experience to see them with like 150, 200 people, right? My question to you, Brian, is I'd imagine with country, a lot of live concerts probably sound very true because they don't employ a lot of that technology and stuff. It's all pretty true with the slide guitar, the steel guitar. So I'd imagine they sound pretty true to what their vinyl or whatever sounded like.
Yeah, they do. The instrumentation does, but if somebody can sing live or not, becomes obvious pretty quickly.
That's the one thing I always hate about rap concerts, outside of groups like the Roots, who actually are a band and rap, is they always play the rap in the background, and the guy is really he's singing over it, but then there's the rap track is actually playing. So rap for me live would never be a good experience. I wouldn't enjoy that unless I saw a band like the Roots that has guitarist, bassist, drummer, and a rapper, lyricist.
Yeah, the other question you asked about small venue versus big venue. Yeah, definitely small venue. Once again, it's personality. But with a small venue, it depends on how small and, what's going on. You can really be a roadie. You can help them move in the equipment. You can talk to them beforehand. You can talk to them afterwards. And, it depends on, how big of a group they are and what they've got going on. So, it depends on how you want to be connected, if you really want to make that personal connection and talk to some people and become their number one fan, and I mean, you can. So that's pretty cool when it comes to smaller artists. You know, and a lot of times people want to stay away from mainstream, so they want to find those little hidden gems, and they want to be a fan of so and so and go follow them around, which is pretty cool. And yeah, Andy about had a heart attack a while ago, Joe, when you said something. We lost Joe.
We did lose him.
Maybe he'll come back.
He's seen the dam too. So
that's what I was going to. I saw you. Here, wait a minute. We got to wait on Joe. Wait a minute. Joe's back. Like Joe's back. Yeah. So Andy about had a heart attack a while ago when you said you had went to see the concert by the Damned. He was just like,
yeah. Yeah, he just casually drops, oh, yeah, these seminal punk bands that, you know, you've listened to your entire life. Oh, yeah, I saw them live. Oh, yeah, the Germs. Oh, yeah, I saw them. Yeah, Belinda Carlisle, she used to be in the Germs. She was Dottie Danger then. Yeah, I met her one time.
Did you want me to tell the quick story of that or what?
Go ahead.
Just real quickly, there were 2 years of festivals. This is before there was like the Coachella and all that stuff, called the US Festival. One was US 82, one was US 83. US 83 was a 3-day festival. First day was new wave, second day was heavy metal, third day was just like a mishmash. The Clash headlined day one. I was there all 3 days. I was not interested in metal. So Van Halen played, the Scorpions played, didn't watch them. You know, again, you have that mindset. But I'll tell you, the band that stole the show, and this is 1983, to me, was the second or third band on the third day was U2. And the rigging, the whatever you call, like, you know, the decoration and stuff, had to be a good 60, I would say 40 to 60 feet off stage. And during one of the songs that U2 played, Bono climbed all the way to the top and right over the US 83 logo, started singing. You know, there was the bridge, there was the instrumentation in the middle of the song, and to pick it back up towards the end of the song, and I was just mind blown. Clash were good. It was great that I saw them. They didn't sound as good as I'd wish. I also saw Oingo Boingo and In Excess on that day, and they knocked it out of the park. Stray Cats, Men at Work, English Beats, Flock of Seagulls, Wall of Voodoo. They were all on day one. It was a great experience. I was lucky that I had a friend that asked me to go along. I wouldn't have done it on my own. And at 16, my mom was pretty cool for letting me go for 3 days, you know, with one adult in charge, to a rock venue that had over 100,000 people at it every day.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
One thing that I have noticed is there seems to be, after Lollapalooza came back, and they redid they tried to recreate the Woodstock experience, we started to see a renaissance of music festival. And so obviously the last couple of years, I haven't been able to go to any of them, but that's something I'm really interested in. I've got a good friend. We worked in the same building, work for the same company, but we don't get to interact all that much at work. Whenever we come up on one, a festival, you know, we'll send the other a screen grab, and it's like, okay, you know, there's 3 or 4 guys that I wouldn't mind seeing on this day, and then this day has nothing for us or me. And so hopefully after the world opens back up and COVID goes away, I'll be able to get back to that. I really enjoy live music festivals. You see,
I got some fun questions.
People, you see kids, babies. It's really a cool experience. So if you've never been to a music festival, especially one that has different genres, that's a pretty cool experience.
All right, I got some questions. Some of your favorite vocalists, who you think's got the best voices you've ever heard? Can be anything, old, new. I'll throw out one, Patsy Cline. If you hear her voice on a recording, oh my goodness.
Favorite voice, one of the best voices. I'm going to go completely out of type. All right. But she only had one big hit album, but Cyndi Lauper.
Really?
She has an amazing voice.
I wouldn't have thought that.
Voice. Now, you really, if the only song you've ever heard from her is "Girls Just Want to Have Fun," you won't get it. But
what about the Time After Time? I like the Time After Time.
Time After Time, yeah. and actually, and it's been within the last 10, 15 years or so, but she was on Howard Stern, and she had an auto harp, and she performed time after time. There might have been a guitar accompanying her, but it was pretty much just her and that auto harp. It was like, old girl still got it. Old girl still has it. She has an amazing voice.
I saw her doing some acting. She's done several acting things lately. Joe, you got somebody?
Freddie Mercury. I got to go. Freddie Mercury. Voice blows me away.
Yeah. What was the guy that sung for Journey? I thought his voice was just phenomenal. Yeah. I thought he was phenomenal. I'll go for new people, Chris Stapleton and Adele. They both are just amazing vocalists, just amazing vocalists.
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer Hudson, Kelly Clarkson. I mean, those people can flat out sing. Kelly Clarkson's got an extra gear. She's got an overdrive where her voice just like shreds. And you're just like, oh my goodness.
I remember certain songs. Like I remember when Barbara Streisand was trying to cash in on the disco thing, and she did a duet with, I think it was Andy Gibb. There's a song called Woman in Love, and she hits a note that goes, now this could be production too. I don't know. I was 12, well, 10, whatever. But she hits a note that goes a good 20 seconds. And I'm like, I get it why people think she's a great singer. I never understood why people said she was a great singer back in the 70s and stuff. But if that was legit and not produced, it's a mind-blowing and kind of gives you shiver kind of note. So there's instances of that I see that I like. But yeah, and Prince, I really like Prince's vocals too. Not a great singer, but I really liked his vocals.
Trying to think. Country, I like Merle Haggard. You can't beat a Merle Haggard song.
Yeah, Johnny Cash, great vocalist.
Cash couldn't sing. He couldn't sing.
No, he couldn't sing, but there's something magnetic about the tone and timbre of it that just draws, particularly when he's doing a storytelling kind of song, it just drags you right in there, man. And
he's got the gravel in his voice, that's for sure.
Yeah,
he sounds like he's experienced life. That's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But with those guys, your Bob Dylans, your Merle Haggards, your Johnny Cashes, they really fall into that singer-songwriter where you know that you're listening to something personal from them. You know, that's something that they lived through, that they walked, and they had the idea. You know, something was inspired from their life, and that's where the song comes from. And going back to what we were saying earlier, that's kind of a different vibe than, hey, you showed up at a studio and this team of writers come up with a song, and you know, they did the focus group, and this sounds like it's going to be more popular, versus somebody just, you know, somebody broke my heart, or you know, just whatever happened in life. Yeah, completely different vibe. Completely different vibe. I do want to point out, Mr. Country Western Guy.
Yes, sir.
That it was Mr. Merle Haggard that's saying that we don't need no marijuana in Muskogee. But then, pretty much the last music he did was him and Willie talking about getting high. So
it was always a big wink thing about that song, because everybody that knew him knew a little bit different. So you need to watch the Kim Burns documentary, because it's all in there, and it's just I was just on the edge of my seat for 10 hours or ever how long it was. It was really entertaining. Learned a lot. Yeah. I like the little bit of history, you know, the history connection to everything going on in America at the time is very cool.
I don't care if the dude wrote about drain pipes for 4 hours. I would watch a Kim Burns documentary on drain pipes, because it's going to be good. The guy has not done a bad documentary. Which
other ones have you watched? The one on baseball?
I watched baseball. Watched Vietnam. I watched World War II. I watched if it's the full length Kim Burns, I watched them all.
I need to watch some more of them.
Jazz was my least favorite. I'm not a huge jazz fan, but still great. I love all the historical nuggets, like you're saying. That's the fun part for me.
You guys have anything else you want to talk about with music?
Well, I want to say that this might just be a part one, because it was kind of a very overreaching. We might come back with something a little more specified, because heaven knows music is something we could do till probably 2023 if we tried real hard. Yeah. I definitely wanted to pick your brain more on certain matters. So it might be good to even come back and do like, genre specific or decade specific.
Yeah.
That would be very, very fun too, so that we could kind of hone in and maybe even do a little research ahead of time to be fresh on some of these things. So that's all I'll say. That the Grumpies might be doing some more music in 2022.
Yeah. So if you guys have any things you want us to talk about or questions you have for us in regards to music, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'll probably throw out an Instagram a week or so before we record again and get some feedback from you guys and make sure we include that. And anything else?
I think we're good, man. I've enjoyed this. We managed to loop in our different experiences and not get pigeonholed into stereotypical kind of debates about music. So yeah, definitely feel like I have a better appreciation for both of you guys are coming from.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And just to let everybody know, going forward, we're planning on recording every other week. So you'll be getting a couple of these a month if my editing skills work and our computers hold tight and don't collapse on us. I figured out what my issue was earlier. I had my Wi-Fi turned on instead of being hardwired. So that's probably what was giving me issue, because it's been smoother ever since. So that's a good thing. Anyway, as always,
Joe and I are definitely the other end of the spectrum. Both of us are talking to our phones. I'm in my den. I guess he's in his living room.
So you're in your basement. I say the cinder block walls, man. He's in the man cave, the man dungeon. All right, guys. We appreciate it, and we'll be seeing you soon. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
All
right. That was fun.